All right, Bengals time. You guys talked to Zach Taylor, Lou Anarumo, and Dan Pitcher this week, Skinny. So after conversing with the head coach and both coordinators, what came out of all of that? What was your big takeaway from this moment? Where are they at with all of this?
Yeah, so it was interesting because it all felt like it had the same feel of like we're going to get better. We believe in these guys and we believe in what we're doing, and we have the right guys in that locker room. And asking Dan Pitcher about the run game, we're just a tick off here or there. We're gonna get better. Are you? I mean, are you? I get it. I don't expect them to go, hey, we suck and I quit. We're gonna quit on the sea. I get some of that. So I'm not blaming them for what they said, but it just all had the feel of grasping it. Boy, I sure hope we do what we used to do, because I've got guys that used to do it. Well, used to doesn't make a damn bit of difference at the minute. It's in the past.
Well, is that maybe the takeaway, that they don't have an answer? That the answer is we're just hoping it gets better at some point?
Yes. And I don't mean that like, well, they're coaches, they need to have an answer schematically. I think they've tried a lot of things. And a lot of it, I mean, the run game isn't working at the moment. Can we blame Frank Pollock? Sure. I blame whoever you want to blame as a fan. That's fine. But you know what? And again, I wrote this about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I think they're paying for some bad drafts. I mean, right now on defense, if I took away Trey Hendrickson, give me a dude on that defense, a guy that you go, that's the guy. That's a guy on that defense.
What's happened to Logan Wilson? Everyone was talking him up so much last year. He hasn't made any plays really this year, hardly.
Right. Take off Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and you can't do that. But again, those are two players. That's it. They're two guys, and you hear that. Well, they've got Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Great. They're not winning games by themselves. And I just think for whatever reason, the roster just either got old in some spots. The young guys haven't bubbled up. The old guys have gotten older, and you have the confluence of where we're at, which is not a very good football team. And you can say, well, they almost beat Baltimore. If it wasn't for a bad snap and hold, give you that. Well, if not for a penalty on a rookie, they beat Kansas City. I'll give you that. But the 4 games that they've played against the 4 what would be playoff teams at the moment, Baltimore, Kansas City, Washington, and then Philly, you're 0-4. 2 were maybe unlucky. I might give you some of that, but then I'll flip it on its head of, you didn't exactly wow in the 3 wins against 3 bad teams either, in Carolina, Cleveland, and the Giants. So I think you're stuck with, this isn't a good football team. Prove me wrong. Win this week against the Raiders and at least win one of the 2 before the bye at Baltimore or at the Chargers. Sweep all 3 and you can make me a believer. But right now, it's hard for me to believe in this team in the roster, because I keep watching defensive backs get turned around in coverage. I watch no pass rush. I watch teams run the ball at will. I see the offense that can't run the ball, can't find a receiver outside of T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And then unfortunately, T doesn't play. And, the other receivers, other than Jamar Chase, the other wide receivers had 8 targets and 2 catches. They're 0-3 when T doesn't play. That's kind of a glimpse into maybe the future without T. I hate to be doom and gloom. I really do, because I've tried to be optimistic. And I really thought there were some strides forward defensively in the Giants and Browns game. But then you played another good offense and they owned you. I mean, think about this. They punted 1 time. Washington didn't punt a single time. I mean, that's 2 of your last 3 home games. They punted 1 time. That screams of just absolute horrifying roster.
Yeah, it's pathetic. And I did Mo Eggers' show at B-Dubs out in Anderson this week to do college basketball talk. But before me, Paul Daner was on his show. He was out there as well. So I was sitting there listening to Paul beforehand, and everything you just said reminded me of something that Paul said that day. And I thought it was really well put, where he said, as bad as this feels right now, this season feels more salvageable than the future of this team does all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And I think that's right. When you think about like the Kansas City game and the way that unfolded, and some of the Baltimore, the close losses that they've had, it's like, well, they're close enough that they might be able to fix those things and win a couple more games this year and remain competitive, maybe even sneak into the playoffs. But to your point about like the defense, Skinny, and who is good aside from Trey Hendrickson, Paul was saying, who do you build around on this defense going forward? Who do you want to stick around and be like the building block of the foundation of this defense in the next 3 years? There's not one guy that you would say that about. that's a real concern. I mean, Trey Hendrickson, sure, for one more year, he's going to bitch about the money you're paying him going in next year. You're not going to give him any more, and then he's going to be gone after that. And who knows how good he's going to be going forward. I mean, he was terrible this past week. So
yeah, Fred Johnson owned him.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that as bad as this feels right now, we might be in a spot where we just need to enjoy and hold on to hope T. Higgins stays healthy and hope that he and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow are enough to pull this team through and get them into the playoffs and make something happen, because after this year, it starts looking even more bleak.
Yeah, so let's just say they pay Jamar, and it's going to be a pretty penny if they do, and choose not to pay T, or just think they have to put their finances elsewhere. You know what you're going to need after this year in all likelihood? You're going to need a center. And I don't know if that's clinging to hope for a 7th-round draft pick to suddenly be the center and Matt Lee. Maybe it is. But you're going to need a center in all likelihood. Maybe you get another year out of Ted Karras. They did extend him. And obviously that's probably the answer to it. But it's not like Ted's a Pro Bowl player. He's a okay player. You know, Alex Kappa has not had a good year at guard. You know, the wide receiver situation, I know there's a lot of hope. At least there's more hope now about Jermaine Burton than there has been, but he's got 2 catches all year, and they still, he still didn't get targeted very much in the snaps he was on the field. It's great that, they think he's making strides, and at least he's got his head in his playbook and he's doing better things in practice. That's good to hear, but I see better than I hear. And what I see right now is the guy's caught 2 goal balls on the season, and that's it. Hopefully it's something different moving forward. I do think you've kind of found a tight end in Eric All, some of that, but yes, back to the defense. Your linebackers are going to be another year older. You probably BJ Hill probably won't be around. Then the jury's out on your rookies and Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson, and Sheldon Rankins he's been okay. He was not very good this last game. He was okay the previous 2 games, but again, he's a veteran long in the tooth. Listen, I give Miles Murphy a little bit of rope because he's just come back from injury. But he hasn't exactly stood out to this point in the handful of games that he's played, and he's a 1st-round draft pick. Your corners are a disaster at the moment, and I thought that felt solidified. You have to go sign a veteran corner in this offseason. You have to remake the safety room because Von Bell clearly looks his age, and Geno Stone has been horrific. So you got a lot of pieces to fix, and maybe not a lot of money to do it with, and you sure haven't done it through the draft of late. And again, that sounds complete Debbie Downer, but I wish the front office would prove me wrong.
In terms of the offense this year, getting it back on track, fixing that side of things, is it as simple as they just need T. Higgins to be healthy? That's where all their wins have come from. Their numbers are exponentially better when he's on the field. Is it that simple?
I think it is. I'd like to get Orlando Brown back to full health because Cody Ford, he's not a parking cone. I'll give him that. But, if you face it. Yeah. If you face a quality pass rusher, you're always going to have to max protect and help on his side. And so that takes somebody else out from protecting other places. I mean, if I got to put Zach Moss over there every time, who's picking up the free runner up the middle on a blitz, right? I mean, so you've got that issue. I'd like for Orlando to get healthy, and, maybe it's sitting this week, and because of the short week next week, you give him a little bit extra time to get ready for Baltimore. That doesn't mean you're throwing this game away, but again, the guy's going out of the last 2 games at the same time in the first half, basically with the same injury. So there's an issue there that it keeps cropping up. I appreciate him trying to play through it, but he obviously can't. So to your point, I do think it's that, but I think they've got to either find something in the running game, or you got to get whoever that 3rd receiver is, Jermaine Burton, whatever, that guy's got to start doing something too, and give them a little more, because even with T back the previous 2 games, and again, I know, listen, Cleveland's got a nice defense. Giants got a good defensive front, all those things. You had T in those 2 games, and yes, you won them, but you didn't win them because your offense was great. You won them actually because the other 2 teams' offenses sucked. So it is to some degree, Rick, because again, the numbers don't lie. They're 0-3 without him, 3-2 with him. I think that kind of speaks for itself a little bit. And T did make plays in both of those games, too. So there's that. But I just think that there's still something else missing. Maybe it is the running game, and I don't know how to fix it at this point. And I'm asking questions the other day. There doesn't seem to be an answer other than we're just a tick off. It's a block here. It's a cut back there. Okay, I heard this last year. And listen, I think they made the right move letting Joe Mixon walk, because Joe Mixon's advanced metric numbers suggested he wasn't a right fit in this offense. He didn't break tackles. He didn't make people miss. He's doing great in Houston. Good for him. But I don't think it would be a difference here. So I don't think they made a wrong move there either. Is it Frank Pollock who's the run game coordinator, offensive line?
How does he have a job at this point? I'm sorry, but like it makes zero sense for that guy to still be employed. If you're looking to try to get any type of,
but here's the thing: if they don't, if Zach doesn't believe that that's the issue, that it is just we're a tick off here again.
But at some point, I'm just taking like we've been a tick off in the run game for 3 straight years.
That's a fair point. There's no doubt that's an absolute fair point, and that's where I do think if this season does go somewhat haywire. I know Lou Anarumo's head's going to be called for. I don't think that's probably the right place to go. I do think there'll be a couple of sacrificial lamb assistant coaches, and that's what's going to have to take place.
And I don't even want, like, I'm not even clamoring for people to get fired, but it makes zero sense for Frank Pollock to still have a job because Joe Mixon in itself is enough reason to be like, yeah, that guy sucked here the last 2 years, and he looks like a monster playing for another team. I agree it wouldn't have been fixed here because Frank Pollock is still here, and potentially other people within the calling the plays, Dan Pitcher and Zach Taylor might be the bigger issues as well there. But either way, you have to start changing something up with your running game, and I would start with the guy in charge of the running game.
Yeah, I was talking to Paul yesterday in the media room, and he was talking about his appearance on with Mo, and I guess Mo asked him at one point, was Zach Moss good in Indianapolis last year? And Paul said, I said, yeah. He goes, is Zach Moss good now? He goes, no. Was Joe Mixon good last year? No. Is Joe Mixon good this year? Yeah. I mean, there's a common thread.
There is. I mean, it's pretty obvious to someone like looking at this objectively, and sometimes I just think you're too close to the situation to make the obvious decision there. Do you think back to the T. Higgins thing, do you think him missing these games and the team struggling without him has made it more or less likely that he might be back with the Bengals next year?
I would like to say more likely, but again, Rick, for all the things I detailed that you have to fix, you can't ignore those problems, and it's going to take money to fix them. So, I mean, I guess you could say, well, we'll try to ball out with those 3 dudes and what else we got, and we'll try to win games 31-30. I just don't know if that's a formula for success. I just don't.
I think it's made it so that you absolutely positively cannot re-sign him going into next year because it has exposed all these other glaring holes that you clearly are going to have to spend a lot of money to upgrade certain other positions. Like you either have to get a dominant pass rusher on defense or another offensive lineman.
I will say this. I will say if for whatever reason the light bulb goes off for Miles Murphy from here to the end of the season and he shows why he was a first-round draft pick, maybe Cam Taylor-Britt recovers from this funk that he's in and shows why he was considered maybe a lockdown corner and maybe DJ Turner. Again, I'm going maybes here. Don't get me wrong. I'm going maybes.
Big maybes.
Yeah, those are big maybes. But if those take place, then okay. Then, maybe you then have a different conversation. Okay, we don't have quite as much to fix, and maybe we should pay T.
But here's the other side of that, Skinny. He keeps getting injured. It hasn't been fixed. That was a concern last year about not re-signing him as he's not reliable. This year's proved he can't stay healthy. I don't think you can consider it.
If you remember before the season started, Paul and Jay Morrison had their podcast at the BetMGM downtown, and all of us that are on the beat had different segments in it. And they did a segment with each of us when we were on of give me a player you're buying and a player you're selling. Unfortunately, I was buying stock in Cam Taylor-Britt, but I got booed for this. And I said, I'm going to get booed. I'm going to tell you I said, I'm just selling T. Higgins. Because at the time when he cropped up on that injury list, it was the day we did that. I said, here we go again. And it's kind of here we go again. I mean, when he's healthy and plays, he's a good receiver, but you got to be healthy to play. And I think that's a concern for any team that signs him to big dollars.
Zach Taylor takes a lot of criticism, and that's just kind of the way it goes in the NFL. If you're the head coach and your team's not doing great, the sequence, though, everyone's referring to it as the 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 there that basically ended the game for the Bengals and was just a devastating moment. How bad of a look for Zach Taylor was that, where they turned it over on downs after that bubble screen to Jamar Chase, and on 3rd down, they had just run it right into a pile and got nothing?
Well, the 3rd down run call was fine. It'd be nice if they could execute that portion of it to not put you in the 4th down, correct? I mean, that's a big part of it for me.
But at some point, you do have to start realizing, like, hey, we can't get a yard when we line up against
that's a fair point. So let's start with the decision. We'll go with the decision to go for it.
I'm fine with the decision.
No problem. Yeah. At that point in the game, that's where, in my mind, even I'm like, well, they're not stopping this offense. You can't get 2 scores down. You might as well just try to get this thing and even it back up and hope at some point that they have a miscue, and that's the only way because you're not stopping them. And of course, they didn't the rest of the game. So that decision was the right decision to make, in my opinion. I understand the call. I'm going to tip my cap a little more to Philly, but also, and Zach said this too, I got to put us in a better call than throwing the ball 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. I think that's the part for me is you start in a negative place on the catch. Listen, we've seen Jamar Chase run through tackles a billion times. I don't know if you remember the bubble screen the week before in Cleveland. He caught it, juked the guy. There's nobody blocking really. Juked the guy out and literally carried, I think, 4 or 5 tacklers, another 6 or 7 yards. So we've seen him do stuff like that before. And so you're trying to get your best guy on the run, one-on-one in space where he's either got to make the guy miss or run through the tackle. I understand the call. I don't like the call, and I don't like throwing it behind the line of scrimmage. And I'll give him credit. He didn't bat an eyelash of making excuses for it. He said, I've got to put us in a better call. And that's the hindsight of it. Talking to Dan Pitcher, he kind of, he explained it pretty well of, the way this is executed is, you throw it to here. You don't expect that guy to get downhill as quickly as he did. He said he played it great, and you got your best player's hands on the ball, so you're expecting him to make a play, and the guy just out leveraged, just made a play. Again, I'm not trying to make excuses for it because I don't understand throwing the ball 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, but it's not like anybody ran away and hid from it. I mean, they all stood up and fessed up to, hey, we should have done something different.
Skinny, have you ever, I know you have because you're better. You put in a parlay sometimes and like you're getting into the weeds and you're like finding like, well, there's a second leg and a third leg and a fourth leg. And I like all of these things, but at some point you just realize like, you know what? I should just pick one thing with longer odds instead of needing 4 different things to happen. That's kind of like what the Bengals are doing when they throw behind the line needed to gain on a 4th and short situation. It's like, you're just adding one more variable that might go against you into the mix, another way for you to lose. If you throw it across the line needed to gain, yes, it might not work. Yes, they might make a good play. All those things can happen. But at least you're not going to execute the play, catch the pass, and still be freaking short of the line to get. I mean, it just makes no sense. And here's my issue with Zach Taylor, why I do think it's a pretty bad look for him. To do that and to explain it the way he did is the right way to handle it. The problem is he's done this multiple times, Skinny. He keeps telling us that, like, I screwed up on that one. I'd like to have that one back. That wasn't the right call. I should have thrown ahead of stick. Well, Zach, you've done that about 15 times in your career, my man. So, like, why don't you quit throwing it short of the sticks on 4th and short? Eliminate it and quit apologizing for it, That's a fair point. I would say this, though. I'm going to guess that, Rick, that was the play they highlighted for a 4th and 1 play. That literally that's one that they repped during the week. That was the one that, hey, when we get to a 4th and 1 situation, here's our play call. So, again, it wasn't one I don't think he was searching down the play sheet going 4th and 1. Let's go with this. I think it's one they clearly highlighted because it's what they ran. We've ripped a lot off from Paul Dana already this show, so let's continue on that trend real quick.
I like doing that.
He said something that I agree with and I really like, which everyone was saying, well, why don't you just do the tush push like Philly does in that situation to get the short yardage? The Bengals almost have their own version of that, or something that is much more effective than throwing short of the sticks. And that is spread the field out as much as possible. Let Joe move the pocket to buy himself a little bit of time, and then let him pick apart your defense for 1 yard. You're going to be able to guard all those guys for 1 yard without Joe Burrow finding someone and dunking it, or finding an opening where you screwed up defensively and he's able to run it for himself, which he does very well in a situation like that. Let your best player make the decision and make the play. Let him execute. Don't put it in a situation where there's one option, and if they made a better play than your blocker, well, shoot, you just didn't get it,
Yeah, or put Tanner Hudson in there at quarterback and because he's a former quarterback and let him run the tush push. I mean, he's got tight end size. I think part of the problem is I think you'd be afraid that the guard to guard guys would get blown up.
Well, I understand the idea of not wanting Joe to get hurt. He's not Jalen Hurts.
No.
I don't want Joe Burrow going under center and taking those rushes quarterback sneaks all the time.
I agree with that because Dan Hort asked Dan Pitcher that question yesterday, and it wasn't hey, you're an idiot for not doing this. He just said, why don't you like to sneak Joe Burrow? And he said, well, we've done it before. You've seen us do it before. Yeah, I have. I mean, I've seen it on 2nd and 1s where, the defense isn't bunched up in there and Joe does sneak forward, but it's a really soft, easy sneak to do. We're talking 4th and 1, man. That tush push is just a scrum of bodies. I don't need Joe Burrow in the middle of a scrum of bodies. I don't think any fan wants Joe Burrow in the middle of a scrum of bodies.
If you have Jalen Hurts, you have him to do things like that.
Yes.
He's that type of player because he's not the quarterback that Joe Burrow is. But you saw the Chiefs, they used to do that thing with Patrick Mahomes too, and he got injured doing it, and they stopped doing it.
Well, they started doing it with tight ends, though.
Exactly. But I mean, they're not going to do it with their franchise quarterback anymore because you are putting them at risk, and that's completely understandable. One other thing that I completely forgot about, Hard Knocks is getting ready to go with this team. I mean, what a disaster this Hard Knocks season could end up being for fans.
Yeah, no question. Got that. You got the silly Simpson's alternate thing that's coming up. I mean,
I knew you would love that.
I'm over the silliness of this. I'm over just, you know what? I'm over the white outs and the green outs and the brown outs and the orange outs and the orange this and the black. I'm old. Just honestly, I know people in the fan experience, and it's going to sound awful because I don't go as a fan, but you know, I would hope as a fan, I want my team to win more than I need a white out or green out, an orange out, a brown out. Orange is the color of power, and shut the hell up and find a way to have your front office get players to win games.
That was perfectly executed on your behalf.
Thank you.
You can always get local stories right here on YouTube, but go ahead and hit that subscribe button to get notifications to stay in the know.